MademmyifyASMR. Welcome back to MademmyifyASMR, and of course to another True Crime Tuesday. I mentioned in my last video that I would be working on a Jack the Ripper true crime. I'm still working on that, but in the meantime, I got the idea for this one after something a friend had posted on Facebook. He'd posted it he'd posted something saying that it was the anniversary of the Newcastle witches trial, or the hanging of Newcastle witches, which was something he didn't even know about, even though he's lived in the northeast all of his life. So I decided that I would look into it and do that as a True Crime Tuesday, because what I found was really interesting. Also, I quite like doing like the old ones, like the ones from the past, rather than more modern crimes. I don't know why. Also, the local ones are quite interesting as well, just because it tends to be local history that maybe I didn't know. So yeah, I wrote this up quickly so that I could get something for you while I work on the Jack the Ripper one, and I have had Saucy Jack by Spinal Tap stuck in my head every time I start writing stuff about Jack the Ripper, because that's how my brain works. Anyway, this is the story of the Newcastle witch trial. The case of the Newcastle witches was one of the biggest witch trials in England, yet the story is not as well known as those of the Pendle and Berwick witches. The tale of the Newcastle witches is one of a ruthless corporation, a coal monopoly, a corrupt witch finder, and how a sceptical lieutenant saved an accused witch from the gallows. Our tale starts in the 17th century Newcastle. It was a time of turmoil, civil war, regicide, and religious upheaval. It was also a very superstitious age, and an age of many incurable diseases. In such times, people often looked for scapegoats. Newcastle in the mid-17th century had been in the thick of things. Industrialisation on Tyneside as a whole had created a large class of poor and disgruntled workers. As many as 40% of households in Newcastle did not have a fireplace, so they had no source of heating. In 1636, the city was devastated by an outbreak of the plague. From a population of 20,000, 7,000 people died. In the impending civil war, Newcastle found itself on the royalist side as a hub of the coal trade. It was a rich source of funds for the king. As tension rose in the UK, Charles I introduced the English prayer book into Scotland. London merchants saw this as a perfect time to hit the king where it hurt, in his pocket essentially. So they encouraged the Scots to capture Newcastle, disrupting the lucrative coal mine. The town was captured in 1640, then again after a siege in 1644. By the end of the 1640s, with the Civil War over, the Corporation of Newcastle was now controlled by the Puritans from Scotland in place of the royal burgesses. The Puritans were like a extreme religious form of government that had come about in Scotland Puritans were just as money-grabbing and continued to exercise the lucrative coal trade. This angered local brewer Ralph Gardner. It's thanks to Gardner's book that we actually have so much information about the witch trials. Gardner was unhappy with the punitive tax on the coal trade exerted by Newcastle Council and the risk to ships and men sailing up the River Tyne to pay it. He felt North Shields should be the focus for trade, as it was at the mouth of the Tyne rather than inland. If you don't know Newcastle, so you've got, like, say Newcastle's here, and you've got the River Tyne, and then you've got North Shields and South Shields, and there's like a ferry crossing between them, although there wasn't back then. So like North and South Shields are part of Newcastle, but they're the coastal part. To emphasise his case, Gardner drew on the injustice carried out by the Coal Corporation. As part of his book, he also looked at the brutal public humiliations and punishments given to those visiting the town. One such punishment was the Scold's Bridle. If you don't know what a Scold's Bridle is, it's an iron muzzle that goes over the head, and it has a metal framework around it, and that also goes over the head, and then there's a 2 by 1 inch plate that goes into the mouth, and that would press onto the tongue, forcing it down, or sometimes it would force the tongue up onto the soft palate of the mouth, and this would prevent the wearer from speaking, and it resulted in a couple of unpleasant side effects. Like, the wearer would often be like salivating excessively, which would lead to dehydration, or you would just you end up with severe mouth fatigue because your mouth was just open, I guess. They were mostly used to punish women who were considered troublesome. So basically, if you were a bit of a gossip, there was a chance that you could have the Scold's Bridle put on you because, you were stirring trouble. Gardner also took statements relating to the 1650 witch trial, including that of Eleanor Lonsdale, who was prosecuted for trying to dissuade witnesses from speaking against the accused. Fear of witchcraft was rife. The new Puritan regime fostered this fear with more fundamental readings of the Bible, especially the passage, "Thou shalt not suffer a witch to live." In March 1649, Newcastle Council heard a petition concerning witches. The Puritan Council decided that all witches should be tried and enlisted a Scottish witch hunter or witch pricker to find these individuals. The witch trials that happened in Newcastle and Scotland were notable because of the use of witch pricking. This only seemed to happen in the 16th century. There's no accounts of witch pricking after the 1600s. In the 1700s it seemed to have been stopped. The process of picking involved piercing the accused person's skin with a needle, pin or bodkin, as it was believed if they possessed a witch's or devil's mark, they would not feel the pain. Sometimes it's called a witch's mark, sometimes it's called a devil's mark, but they are both the same thing. The witch's mark is different from the witch's teat, which I'll explain what that is in a bit. It was something that I learned actually learning this. The mark was believed to be a permanent marking placed on the witch by the devil, a place is something different. It was a raised bump, often in a wart-like appearance somewhere on the body, and the witch's teat was where the devil would drain the blood from the witch, and that was part of the reason they wouldn't bleed when they were pricked. It's also why the modern image of witches is like they tend to have like warts on the face or something. That's the devil's teat, or the witch's teat. John, I think it's Kincaid, I can't read my own handwriting, was the witch pricker Newcastle council hired to solve their witch problem. Upon his arrival, the magistrate's bellman announced around the town that anyone with a complaint against a witch to denounce them and the accused would be taken to the town hall. Soon, 30 people were brought before the magistrate and the witch pricker. Pricking was not the only way that witches would be identified, but it was also used as a form of punishment. Suspected witches would often be stabbed until they confessed. Torture had been made legal in England, but this did not stop the witch hunters. The accused would often be deprived of sleep and forced to walk for hours until they confessed. In the case of Matthew Bonner, although it's sometimes referenced as Bulmer, who was accused of such crimes as shapeshifting into a cat, luring children to be sacrificed, as well as necromancy. Bonner was forced to walk barefoot over broken bricks while being led by a mule in the dungeons of the Castle Keep jail. Newcastle Keep, I've been there a number of times on various ghost hunts. If you would like to hear stories from any of them, let me know. I'm happy to do a ghost story video of my experience at the Castle Keep. He was tortured in this way for 24 hours. Eventually his feet were so badly damaged that the bones became exposed. Some women were also sodomized and beaten whilst they were held captive in the Castle Keep. Witch dunking was also used as a method of torture, as well as to identify a witch. The accused witch would have their thumbs tied to their big toes, forcing them into a crouched position. They would then be dunked to see if they floated. If they floated, they were a witch. If they sank and drowned, they were innocent. The village pond in Washington Tyne-Weir was used for 3 such trials in 1949. There were other methods involving water that were used to identify witches. Like, there was one where they were put into a barrel, and I think the barrel's filled with water and there's a cross on the top of the barrel, and if they kiss the cross then and survive, then obviously they're not a witch, but if they drown they are. Sorry, I've maybe got that wrong, because obviously witches can't drown, but there was a cross they had to kiss, so like the witch couldn't kiss the cross or something. Of the 30 women in the Newcastle trial, 27 were found guilty, 2 were deemed innocent, but 1 caused some controversy. The final accused was not your stereotypical warty old crone, but a good-looking, well-presented young woman. The process used to determine the accused was a witch. They would be brought before a jury of men. Their undergarments and underskirts would then be removed. The prick test would then be performed on the woman. The Lieutenant Colonel Hobson was at the trial and witnessed this degrading spectacle. He had some medical knowledge from his time in the military, and accused John Kincaid and his aide of conning the court. He accused 14 women and 1 man were hung on the Newcastle town moor on August 21st, 1649. We don't know all their names, but the following is a list of the names that I could find. Matthew Bonner, Isaac Brown, Margaret Maddinson, Anne Watson, Eleanor Henderson, Eleanor Rogers, Elizabeth Dobson, Mrs. Elizabeth Anderson, Jane Hunter, Jane Coupling, Margaret Brown, Margaret Moffat, and Eleanor Robson. As Margaret Brown was hung, she cursed for a sign of her innocence to be shown. As soon as she dropped from the gallows, blood gushed out onto the crowd. Somehow the rope had severed her jugular, and it coated the crowd in her blood as she spun. As for the witch hunter, John Kincaid, and his assistant, after Hobson had proved them as frauds at the trial, he and his assistant fled Newcastle. He was arrested but escaped to Scotland, and he was eventually recaptured and later hanged after confessing to causing the deaths of 220 English and Scottish women. After the witches were hung on the town moor, their remains were all buried in an unmarked grave. They were essentially thrown into a pit in St Andrew's churchyard in Newcastle. However, in January 2008, the churchyard began being renovated. They were adding some lights along the churchyard, and teeth, pieces of skull and rib bones were uncovered. Although it couldn't be proven, it was speculated these may be the bones of the Newcastle witches. It was also claimed that the bones may be cursed after one of the workmen who had touched the bones broke out in blisters. That was the case of the Newcastle witches. I hope you enjoyed it. I quite enjoyed researching that